What's the craziest thing you've seen unfold live on television before it could be taken off air/censored? When I was around 7 years old in Panama City, Florida, two teenagers hacked into the local news feed. We were in the living room watching the news and it started to break up and then went to snow. Before my dad could get up to mess with the rabbit ears, the signal resolved to show two kids in a bedroom looking at something off screen. Then they looked at the camera. Once they realized they were on live TV, they started screaming and hugging each other and jumping around yelling, "We did it! We did it!" After a few seconds, the signal resolved and went back to the newscaster, who apologized for the disruption. Then they just went back to reporting the news like nothing happened. When I was a kid, TV shows were interrupted all the time for high-speed chases and police standoffs. One time a helicopter was tracking a guy who was driving through a field. The driver hopped out of his van with a shotgun. The reporter was telling the helicopter to pan away from the shot, but they didn't. The driver then put the shotgun in his mouth and blew his head off on live TV. The camera cut and came back to the in-studio reporter, who had a defeated WTF look on his face. I swear this led to less situations like this being shown on TV. This is so stupid, but I was a yunjin when it happened. A guy was holding up a sign on the Today Show, or some national morning TV show, that said "Marry me Julia," or something like that. Willard Scott or Al Roker or someone went up to the guy and said, "Tell us a little about Julia." And the guy was like, "Nope, I'd rather marry Steve," and started making out on camera with the guy next to him. The host booked it and was like, "Oh, onto the weather." Prior to then I'd never even heard about being gay, let alone seen anything like it. I'm not sure why that image stuck with me, though it was pretty shocking at the time. Probably the reporter in a canoe covering how bad the floods were, and then two dudes walk through the puddle she's floating in. Runner-up to the guy pretending there were hurricane-force winds and bracing himself while yelling into the mic. Same thing happened. Some dudes just kind of walked by in the background. Both times the poor reporters had to pretend it didn't happen, and both times it was absolutely hilarious. I was watching a live broadcast in Texas. The reporter was saying that every year the police have to burn all of the drugs that they seize in all their drug busts. It was mostly huge piles of marijuana, probably a 10-foot high or so pile. The reporter was in the foreground and she mentioned that most of the police were off-duty and volunteering to be there so that the blaze wouldn't get out of control. So all these police and this pile of weed are in the background and it is lit. As the pile starts roaring into a big bonfire, even I could tell that they were standing way too close to it. At least 30 or 40 police officers all standing really close to this bonfire with their backs to the camera. So this reporter decides to ask one of them a question and walks over and taps one of them on the shoulder. This high-af police officer turns around as this reporter is asking him something and he looks directly at the camera with these squinty red eyes and goes, "Why the fuck?" The LA riots were really brutal to watch on television. They tried to not show any graphic violence, but sometimes it just happened. You saw a lot of footage of people looting and running up and down streets, throwing things and hitting people, but nothing really bad until those men caught Reginald Denny stranded in his truck at an intersection. They smashed the truck windows and dragged him by his hair, I think, out of the truck and just stomped the ever-loving crap out of him, and the camera never moved. It was a news helicopter shooting down so you could see the entire intersection, and it legitimately looked like you were seeing a man beaten to death right on television. And then when you thought it was over, there was that kick and you just knew he was dead. You just knew no one could survive that, and it was so upsetting and terrifying to see that kind of unbridled violence take place live right in front of you. And then came the helpers, a few men. One of them, a very large black man, came to Denny's rescue and the attackers scattered like stray, vicious dogs and they helped Denny. They saved his life. It was only a few minutes, but until 9/11 it was one of the most dramatic things I'd ever seen on television.